Hey guys, want to jump back on jQuery today. We're actually called up now in our schedule, and so we're looking at this section here on the w3schools.com jQuery tutorial page. We're looking at the jQuery HTML section. So basically this week you'll be reading everything in this section here. Um, some of this stuff we're not going to use in our final project, but I do at least want you to be aware of it. So I'd like you to read through the entire thing, but I will just mention that starting with the CSS stuff down to the dimensions stuff, that's not going to prove as useful for the things that we'll be doing in this class, but I just want you to have some exposure to that. The main thing I want to focus on in this video though is the get, set, add, and remove jQuery, the methods that are associated with that. So let's just jump right in and look at some of these get options that we have with jQuery. We got three function calls listed here: text, HTML, and val. And I want to go over each of those. And in order to do that, I'm going to use the assignment that I gave you last week, the homework 7 assignment, where you basically took the billing form that we had created before and you added the shipping information onto that, and you fixed it where, like, when you click this button here, it would hide the shipping information, or you could click it again and it would show the shipping information. But one thing we haven't learned how to do is how to actually get the values that are in something like an HTML form. So, what if, for example, I've got this this top billing information filled out, and maybe you need to get that information in jQuery. So how would we go about doing that? Well, for example, let's say I want to get the name that's in this particular field here. First of all, I need to somehow select that field. jQuery gives us a variety of ways that we can do that. If I look at this particular field here, I just right-click and inspect it, and so it pulls it up over here in my JavaScript debugger, and I can see the HTML, and I see that this field has an ID of lowercase name. All right, so that means I can select that field by $, open parentheses, quotation marks, don't forget your quotes, pound, and then the ID, which in this case is just name. All right, because it's the name field. So that should select that field for me. And if I want to get the value of that field, if I do dot and call the val function, I'm just going to hit enter here so you can see what jQuery returns. It actually gives me the value that's in that field, right? So if I change this to, say, my full name, and then I come over here and I call that function again, it gets the updated value of that field. So that's the way, as your user is working on a particular page, in this case, filling out an HTML form, you can do some things in jQuery. You can respond, to inputs that they put in, and kind of interact with the user in that fashion. So that's how you would get the value of something like an input field on a form. You would call the .val function. Now, val is generally used for something like form fields. If you want to get something like, for example, the text that's in this header up here, how would we go about doing that? Well, same as before, I'm going to right-click on that area and inspect it. And when I do, I see that that header has an ID associated with it as well. The ID is header billing, so I'm going to copy that. So I'm going to write my selector to select that particular element. So the header billing, the element with the ID of header billing. And if I want to get the text that's inside that H2 tag, then I would call the text function. So I just say text, open close parentheses, and when I hit enter there, sure enough, it gives me the information that's inside that H2. So this is in essence what it did. It said it didn't really matter what element it was. In this case, it happened to be an H2, but this will work for any HTML element on the page. You just select that element, and the way that we happened to select this one was using the ID, because it did have an ID defined for it. And we just said, give me the text, and what that will do is it will return any text that is in between that tag, right? In between the opening and closing tags for that particular tag. All right. You could see, like, if I was able to select this div tag here and I called .text on that, it would return name on card. Return this text here, right? So it'll just get whatever text is in between that, in between those tags there. Now, there was one other thing that it mentioned here as far as getting values, and in addition to text, we've looked at text, we've looked at val, but then there's also HTML. And the difference with HTML is that HTML not only gives you the text, but if there happens to be any HTML that's surrounding that text, it'll give you that information as well. So in the case of this header2 tag, if I call the same thing, but instead of returning text, I return HTML. In this case, it's going to return exactly the same thing because there is no HTML in between our opening and closing header tag, right? It's just the text that's contained there, right there. But if we happen to add some HTML, and this will actually let me do that. Let me, I think it will. Let me see. I'm going to add an italics tag here inside there. When I do that, oh, it didn't actually work. All right, I should have tested that before I tried to do it during the session. Let's find a tag that's already got some HTML in it. Well, I'll give you an example. All right, so we've got this div tag that includes all of the billing form. All right. So if so this tag here, you see how it highlights this entire region over here where the billing information is. If I get the text for the billing form, that will return, I call the text function on that, that will return only the text that's contained within that div tag. So if I hit enter there, look at what it shows. It shows all of the text, billing information, name on card, card type, including spaces that are contained within my billing form div tag here, right? The text only though. But what if I want to get all of the HTML as well? Well, the way that I can do that is instead of calling the text function, I can call, I'm just going to display the same thing, but instead of text now, I'm going to call the HTML function. Look at this. When I do that, I get all of the HTML that's contained within that billing form, that div with an ID of billing form, right? So you select your element, and .html says return all of the HTML that's within that tag, right? So pretty cool. That would give us the ability to get all of that HTML back and then do something with it. And so now the question is, if I do something with that, what if I want to write some HTML back to that tag, right? That would be pretty useful. Well, that's where the next section comes into play, the jQuery set portion. And with text and HTML and val, you're calling the exact same function, all right, that you call whenever you're getting the data that's in that within that particular element. But if you pass something in a parameter if you pass something in between the parentheses, when you make those calls, instead of getting the value back, it'll set the value for whatever the selected element is. So let's try that. So now, for example, the first thing that we looked at was we got the value that was stored in the input field that had an ID of name, right? And so we got back my full name. That was this information over here, right? What if I want to overwrite that value? Well, I would make the same exact call, but in my val function here, I would pass in a parameter, and that parameter would include whatever text I wanted to put in that input field, right? So let's say my new name is what I want to display. So I call that, hit enter, and sure enough, it overwrites the value that was there, and it writes in the value that I passed into the val function, right? So that's a way that you could overwrite the existing value that was there. And so something that we could potentially do with that then is, when we had this set up when it says use billing information for shipping, when you click this checkbox here, it just hid the shipping information. But usually what you see on most sites is instead of hiding the shipping information, what it will do when you click a checkbox like that is it'll take all the information that's up in the billing section, and it'll just copy that information down here into the shipping fields, the corresponding shipping fields. And so the way that we could do that with jQuery would be something like what we just did. We would select let's see, for example, what the ID of this. The ID of this is name2, right? So if I were to pass in the value, if I were to select the name2 field and for the value of that, pass in the same value that we had in the other name field, then it's going to set my new name down here in the shipping name region. All right, and just to make sure that you're clear on this, if I wanted to, let's say I changed the billing information at the top here to just be my name, okay? And we want whatever is in the field up top here to be copied to what's down here whenever we click this checkbox. Well, what I would do is I would select the name to field, which is what my selector's doing here. And in that field, I would set the value. I wouldn't type in the actual string. I would set the value to whatever is the value of the first name field. So check this out. So I'm going to go ahead and close the parentheses of my function there so I don't forget that. But now what I'm going to pass into it is I'm going to select the first name field, which had an ID of just name, right? And I want to put the value of that in the value of the other field. So if I run that code, look at what it does. It took the value from up here and it set the value of this to the same thing, right? So this portion here returned this value up top, and then it took that value that was returned and stored it in this one here, right? Because of this function call. So pretty cool. Opens up some options there on how to manipulate the data in a form. What about HTML and text? So let's say, for example, we want to change the text up here from billing information to just, we want to shorten it and we want to say it should be billing info. Okay, so let's inspect that. So we get our ID again. Clear this out. The ID is header billing. So let's select that element. And we want to set the text to be, instead of billing information, we want to set the text to be billing info, right? And so if I run that code, sure enough, it changes this text up top here to billing info. And we can see it in the actual HTML here as well, right? It actually changed it there. Let's say instead of that, we want to change the HTML inside a tag, and we saw that the H2 tag. I just want to see what happens here. What if we do HTML? So if I change the HTML to this and I try to insert the italics like I was doing, like I was doing before, let me see what happens. And looks like I accidentally cut that off. All right, let's see if that works. It did. All right, cool. So we weren't able to insert those I tags right up here in the debugger, but if I add those I tags by calling the HTML function on that element and passing in a new string, which included that HTML, it works, and sure enough, it italicizes this this text up here. So text again returns just the text information, right? It strips all of the HTML off that's within that tag whenever you call the text function. But when you call the HTML function, it'll return all the HTML that's there. And if you include a string when you call the HTML function, then it'll overwrite whatever HTML was in it before. So we could overwrite the entire billing form here. If I said billing form, and for the HTML for that, I want to overwrite all of that HTML, and I'm going to pass instead just a simple paragraph that says the form is gone. Whoops. All right, close our paragraph, and I want to close my HTML function call. When I hit enter there, oh, it didn't like that. What did I mean? Oh, I forgot my quote. I'm missing a quote right here. Okay, let's try that again. And look at there. That entire region now is gone, and instead there's just a paragraph that says the form is gone. All right. So that's how you both get values using jQuery and also how you set values. It's pretty cool because you're calling the exact same function for both of those, right? So I think I'm going to stop right there and do a second video for the next information. Go through those examples as you're reading the get and the set region here, and let me know if you have any questions about that.